Hello everyone, this is Jaime Chesney with One-on-One today with Eric McKenna. Eric McKenna of the Eric McKenna Project. He does have a show similar to mine, sharing inspirational stories. He's up to what?
Madness.
In madness, yeah. You have what, 118, 19 shows now?
I think today actually will be, Jamie, 113.
Wow.
Which is still, I thought I'd get as far as 30 or 50. And poof, I'd be gone. But it kind of
keeps going.
It worked out.
Well,
yeah.
you're an inspiration to me.
Thank
I
you.
love your show and how professional it is. But I was checking you out, looking at your website, and
Okay.
on your bio it says that you're an entrepreneur and a rock and roller. So, in that order, or which is it? So, tell me more about that.
Nothing that was written, while very complimentary, kind of summed it up. And many years prior, this one guy would always say, you're like this serial entrepreneur. You just always have these crazy ideas, but at heart, you're a rock and roller. And it was true. And that's kind of the thing. And as for the order, man, when I go to write those checks on Friday, hopefully, to pay the bills, I want to be that entrepreneur. But as soon as I get in my car,
You're the rock and roller.
and that music goes on, my whole state changes.
I love it.
Yeah, rock and roll is like I guess without the rock and roll, the story might not be there.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. They say music is the language of the soul. So,
It is the language of the soul. It's the language of a lot of things, supposedly.
I love it. So I typically like to start at the beginning.
Okay.
So tell me about you, Eric, like where you're from, like where everything started in your life, your parents.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. We're in Coriopolis now in my office, and thank you for coming on location. It's one thing I do love about your show. It's a location-based show, and I think there's a uniqueness to that. But thank you for coming down and giving me some time. I am a Coriopolis native, probably not too far from where we're located now. I was born and raised in this town, the one of two offspring of Dan and Cheryl McKenna. Mid-60s, I was born in 66, long time ago. Parents took me to the Navy base in Long Beach, California, where I spent a couple of years of my childhood there, which no recollection.
So your dad was in the Navy?
He was in the Navy. Yeah. I think he was. There's pictures of it. But California in the mid-'60s, from what I understand, was just crazy. So my mother was this stay-at-home Navy wife, as my father was on this ship, and I think my mom really started to dig music, which it was always in her, about rock and roll music, the Stones and the Beatles, the Who, things that were in at that time, and the crazy bands that would come to California that ended up being these monstrous bands, but at the time were just starting, and no one knew what they would be. So she probably was living in an enchanted time for music, and I was oblivious to it all because I was too young, unfortunately. But I guess we were there a couple years, and I came home back to my mother's family, and I was, McKees Rocks, Coriopolis, Neville Island, Moon Township, this western suburb of Pittsburgh is where I started life. Yeah, I was a Coriopolis kid, I was a Milltown kid.
Yes. So what was that like, growing up in the mill town of Coriopolis, and, what school did you go to, and what were you involved in?
Yeah, so I did grow up right in this town, Coriopolis. It was my hometown, and it's funny how life circles back around after living different places. You kind of come home, and for better or worse, I'm back. But my formidable years were spent here in Coriopolis. Very working class family background, especially on my mother's side. Very ethnic, very Italian. I can tell by the wonderful food that crossed my plate growing up. Yeah, that's just probably true. Coriopolis was a great place, and I think the 70s was a great place to live and grow up. None of us had anything. We were all poor, but since we were all poor, we didn't know any better.
So you were happy?
Yeah, and I think so. I think childhood was great. I think being a kid that young in Pittsburgh in the 70s, being 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old in the early 70s was not a bad place to be. We didn't have the technology of today, and we certainly didn't have the means that we give our own children, right? But all of that did not matter because we all didn't know any better. We were all the same. you know, and I think we were very, at least the way I was raised, we were really colorblind. We were living in a diverse community, and I am fortunate and very thankful that my parents raised me in such an environment, because it has served me well, and it has been something I've fallen back on countless times through my life. Regardless of what's happening in society, I can always fall back to the foundation I was given growing up as to how I look at the world. Does that make any sense? So, yeah, Coriolis was great.
I mean, I think that's how we all, form our opinions of the world during our childhood and our experiences.
And Coriolis it was an interesting time to grow up, because while the early 70s were the formidable years, by the time 75, 76 came around, a lot of the mills that were here, whether they were in Coriolis, foundries, or whether they were mills in Neville Island or Aliquippa, were a lot of the men, the fathers, the grandfathers of the town, that were taking care of their family. The income was coming from these mills, these fabrication plants, these foundries. And you know the story, mill towns in southwestern Pennsylvania, late 70s, mid 70s, late 70s, early 80s, the area really took a bad hit. So outside of learning about unemployment early, I'd say the rest of it was pretty good. Yeah, the rest of it was pretty good. Definitely a good place to grow up, for sure.
Sounds like it. Yeah. So what were you involved in as a kid? Like what are the things that helped shape your future?
Well, I definitely love baseball, no question. That goes back to just family out on the West Coast on my father's side and my mother's side. I grew up a big Oakland A's fan, which is really strange for a Pittsburgh kid. Grew up a Pirate fan, Steeler fan, loved hockey, but it was baseball for me from a sports standpoint. That was where I found my love, and to this day, baseball still plays a big part of my life. I think the real game changer for me, though, was music. My mother introducing me to Zeppelin and The Who and really heavy guitar rock as a kid. I didn't know any better. That's the music she played on the record player. And then my uncle was a drummer in a band locally here, so getting to see him play drums on rather large events, it was really odd. And I didn't know how cool it was. I was too young to know. Yeah. But I knew right around 76, there was some friend from school brought over 2 albums, and albums to me were something that, my mother had those, and I have my own. And I'll never forget these 2 records. They were really landmark records for a kid 10 years old in 76. It was Destroyer by Kiss. Like, what the fuck is this? And the same day, there was an album called 2112 by the band Rush. Very different records. Like, I played one, it was cool. I played the other one. It's kind of cool, but different. But in some kind of amalgamation, I know you're very big on moments in life, you're probably going to bring that up. But that's a moment for me where music meant something to me personally, because it wasn't anything I was shown. This was an exploratory thing where I found the music that I loved. I found the music that I dug. This was mine, intrinsically mine. It made my uncle and my aunt and my cousins cringe because the music was different and weird and horrifying, right? But it was mine. And I think it was those 2 records in that little moment in time in probably June of 76, spirit of 76, right? I'm old. But that moment of putting those 2 records on that turntable, I cannot stress enough how monumental. My whole world just changed. It was like magic to me. The moment I heard it, was like what the fuck is this, right?
It's funny how music will do that. It helps you form your identity. And
it did. Yeah, so... Yeah, it was, and it was a rallying cry, I think, for a lot of young people that, because growing up's not easy, right? Would you agree?
Oh, I would never want to do it again.
Yeah, regardless of where you were born or where you grow up, fitting in. How was childhood? My childhood was pretty good. My childhood was probably pretty normal in a lot of ways. I was a middle of the road kid, so I had friends there were heads, burnout friends. I had friends that were jocks. I was in the Scouts a lot because that was the extracurricular activity that my parents threw me in, but I was also playing a little baseball. But the heads, the burnouts were also endeared to me because they liked the kind of music that I did. I was a really confused, like my identity was very strange. So I was kind of a middle of the road kid. I felt comfortable in there, you know?
Yeah.
And then when I would go to Scouts or whatever, that would be my place to shine. Like I was the big dog there because out of that group of friends, that was where I could, you know, put on airs or pretend that I believed my own bullshit. But once I got to school in the broader mix of, you know, all the jocks and so forth, I just kind of, I was just a middle of the road kid. I enjoyed it, you know, and I think I can identify with kids that talk about, you know, wanting to fit in, because I think I was a kid that desperately, in the beginning, desperately wanted to fit in. That whole individuality I had not learned that. When I was young, I wanted to fit in.
That's natural.
I think so.
It really is natural it's human nature to want to be accepted for who you are and want to fit in, and to maintain that authenticity at a young age before you even know who you are.
Right.
Truly is a difficult thing I think we all struggle with. But
yeah,
I mean, it sounds like you were okay with where you were. And
yeah, it was mischievous, and I think for me it was, again, if you know any younger listeners, younger viewers won't be able to identify with this, but we used to get our baseball on an AM radio. So there was those moments just about every day I could listen to a Pirate game. But I couldn't immerse myself in it like these kids do today. There was not internet. There was not even baseball on television. It was that little blue radio. But outside of that little window when the Bucks might be on, it was, what do I do with myself? And if I wasn't outside playing, which is a novel idea today, right? Kids don't play outside.
Oh, I try to get mine outside.
Yeah, I try to too. Yeah. So it came back to like being alone with those records, you know, and those records drove my parents nuts. Feel bad for them. But I could, and I would listen to anything. And you know, it's like I read something when I was a kid. You know, your musical taste is kind of like your food tastes. Yeah, you be open to trying anything. But once you eat something you don't like, you kind of know it right away, and odds are likely you're not going to go back and revisit it.
Do you have any particular music that you feel that way about? Any style? Yeah,
well, I don't know if it's a style, but I think my attitudes have matured over time. Early on, though, I wanted to do anything but what my parents were listening to. And I admired my mother. I mean, Zeppelin, Rod Stewart, even the first Black Sabbath record, the introduction into guitar rock was from my mom. But by the time I was 10 or 11, you know, I was starting to push back a little bit. Then it was like those things like Aerosmith, Kiss, Deep Purple, and then moving even later on into the 80s, the music that horrified my parents, because every generation is horrified by the generation after them.
Yes.
So, but I thought that music gave me an identity. I think kids need to find that identity, regardless of the year or the generation. They struggle for that, and I think that gave that to me, which was already a pretty damn good childhood. But I think the insecurities of fitting in early were kind of salved by listening to music. Make any sense?
Makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's music. If you haven't figured out, music's an important thing.
Yes.
To me.
More of the rocker than the entrepreneur. Still not sure about that yet.
We'll find out. I hope they kind of go together.
I think so.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about what you've going on.
Thank you.
I think they do.
I got lucky.
Yeah. So tell me about more like you were in the Boy Scouts and baseball.
Yeah.
So what was that like, and how did that impact your life growing up?
It was pretty normal in terms of the baseball, and just it was a rallying cry for friends and associations. Music was the same thing. Hopefully they interlapped sometimes. For me, life really took an unfortunate turn for me, and it did when I was in the Scouts and I was excelling, and I had gone through the 70s and early 80s being a Boy Scout. I think I was a Cub Scout, and I was a Weeblo in Boy Scouts. And my father, God rest his soul, always wanted the best, and he believed in the program so much. He was an adult scout leader when it made sense. He introduced me to a great guy named Jim Pickard, who was our scoutmaster, a state police officer. I loved him like an uncle. Wonderful man. And I felt that was a rather blessed part of my life, because the experiences for a young kid was amazing. New Mexico, Maine, Wisconsin. We did a lot of traveling. Sadly for me, and a necessary part of, I guess, if I'm going to talk about my story and how things formulated to make it all sense, in 2000, I want to say it was 19. I should know a date, right? It was coming on to the point where I started to notice girls. It wasn't real cool to be in Scouts anymore. I think it was 1980, or 81 rather. And I think I was ninth grade in high school. I had just done it all. I think when you kind of push, or when you nudge a child so hard at something, anything, there is that point where you sometimes can push a little too hard.
Yeah.
And I think that I either was being pushed a little harder than I wanted to be to achieve, or maybe I wasn't. Maybe I had just done all I could do, and it was just time to. So I made a decision. I'm gonna, after these last couple events this summer, I'm going to be done. And just like a bad movie, on the last event that I was going to be away for a week at a camp, and I was in a leadership role at this point as a young person. I had it easy. I mean, had my own area. I didn't have to partake in all the rudimentary stuff. It was kind of a cakewalk. I figured I'll go for the week, have fun. During this time, I was abused. And what? it was an abuse that happened. It was an event. It was one event. My autonomy at this event played against me, in that I had my own tent. I had my own area. We were at a campsite with multiple troops there, multiple adult leaders. Some we knew, some we did not know. I was unfortunately taken advantage by a troop leader from a neighboring troop. I believe the gentleman was in law enforcement, but he took advantage of me, and the plate was set because all the planets lined up, I guess, in a really difficult, at the time, very horrifying circumstance. I bring it up and I mention it only because it really helped define where my life went from that point. It was, to me, as a 14-year-old kid, it was a little violent. It was, he had a firearm with him. I don't know if it was law enforcement. I don't know if he was a gun enthusiast. Oh my gosh. But it was at the middle of the evening, and there's nothing I could do about it. It wasn't a long, drawn-out process, but it was absolutely 100% horrifying. Nothing I would want to wish on anybody. This happened to me, I think it was the fall of 81, or the spring of 81, and I handled it in a way that to this day I still don't understand how I was able to do that. The event happened. I cleaned myself up both mentally, physically the next morning, and I basically just 2 days later, I went through the motions and went home. It was a traumatic event, but somehow I figured out a way that the best way for me to handle it at that time anyways was just plow forward. Just accept what happened and go forward. A year prior, in my hometown here, I had a priest that had come to become either the parish father or one of the local priests at our Catholic church. Kept nudging me to be an acolyte or an altar boy. And I think it was an acolyte was the next thing, and it wasn't me. That was just never anything I wanted to do. And he kept nudging me to do this, and I would tell my folks, I say, this priest, and you can look him up, Coriopolis Church, mid-'80s, he was arrested for a bunch of things, but this priest was making me uncomfortable. The church sponsored our scout troop, so when I was bringing gear up one day, for an event from the basement of the church, this priest grabbed me, and he was a very big man, 300 plus pounds, a gross individual. But he grabbed me and pulled me in tight and was like, it almost, whether it was a playful bear hug or whether it was something else, I really never know. But I really let him have it. And for a skinny little 14-year-old kid, I just punched him in the face. Wow. And I hit him.
Good for you.
But he didn't go down. But he was a big. Now, I was horrified because
You were still probably
well,
recovering.
was he giving me? Well, no, this is well before. This is the year before.
Oh, okay, the prior.
Yeah. So at that time, when all this happened, I didn't know. Did I just punch a priest? Did I just shove a priest? Was he giving me a bear hug out of fun? But it didn't seem. It seemed creepy.
Yes.
Being 1980, how devoted Catholics my folks were, my whole family was. The strength of the Catholic Church within the small mill town, the way things were, they were the church itself was the caretaker of the scout troop. It was all kind of interconnected, and at that time, my folks just had a hard time believing my side of the story. You know, like they were horrified. Their little son just cold clocked the priest, right?
Yeah.
In front of two other scouts who were even younger than I. So I was, I had to apologize to the priest. I had to go to the rectory. I had to go through all that crap, and I just wasn't believed. So fast forward almost a year, when this happens, there was nothing in my psyche that let me believe, I guess, that I was going to be believed by my own folks or believed by my family, which I probably would have been. But at that time, you can't, a 14-year-old brain is not fully developed.
Well, especially
emotionally.
What happened a year prior to that, you weren't
exactly
accepted.
Right.
Your truth wasn't accepted or believed, and you had to go through that process. So fast forward a year and having that traumatic experience, you said that the best thing you could do was just move on. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Well,
but how did you cope?
At that time, it made all the sense in the world to me. Being 14 years old, definitely afraid of being made fun of. Definitely afraid of destroying my mother and father.
Yeah.
And that my dad loved the program because Scouts had been so good to him. And even for me, there was a lot of benefits. I was an Eagle Scout. I had done all this stuff. Jim Pickard, my scoutmaster, like an uncle to me. I couldn't see going through, number one, having my integrity questioned again, or not being believed, I guess. Integrity is a big word back then. Probably didn't know what it meant. But not being believed. Right. Not being able to go through all of that. And then, of course, having this happen on my last event, because I had outgrown the program. I didn't have to be there. I went there out of obligation a little bit. I went there because I figured it was my last trip. I'm going to, have the sit down talk with my folks after that trip was over anyways. And damn it, did that not just change everything. So I don't make light of it. It's just there wasn't a lot of options for me. Had I went crying, because I was definitely crying. I was definitely in a bad place there, at least initially for a good 12 hours. Or if I had reported the guy, if I was just absolutely horrified of the man who assaulted me. Horrified. I was horrified of guns. I was raised in a house there was never any guns. So we weren't hunters. We weren't, not that I was a passive person, but I just didn't have any exposure to that stuff. So all that stuff really, and I knew that if, getting my father in that conversation, getting Jim Pickard or getting the leaders in my life at that time to go down that road and venture into that, what was it really, all I was going to do was elongate the process for me. In my eyes, it was going to elongate the fear. There was a lot of embarrassment because my whole persona in that little group of friends and scouts was that I was like the king shit. I believed my own bullshit. I had accomplished everything there was. And outside of scouts in school, I was just an average kid fitting in. But in that world, I was the king dog, right? Yeah. I was the alpha male out of a group of 40 younger, or my age or younger, scouts. They looked to me. I was the guy, right? And my younger brother, my only sibling of 3 or 4 years, who didn't want to be at scouts because he just didn't like it, but we did it out of parental obligation. He was maybe 20 tenths over there. Brian was physically there, right? For me to go down a road and accuse somebody without the knowledge that I was going to be believed, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. I couldn't get there. And the prudent thing for me to do at that age, with timidity, the lack of not being believed, fear, the fear of the gun, fear of this individual who was definitely a bigger man in terms of size and bravado, and I can And my assumption that he was in law enforcement, I don't know. And we'll talk about that. I never really went after that person. I know their name well, and I don't even know if they're with us anymore. I just didn't want to. I erased that from my life.
Wow.
Having that happen it changed a lot of things for me. It changed a lot of things, but at the same time, I guess the message of it is I made sure it didn't change too much. There was something in me, a survival mode, or something that I don't even understand, but it made me get on with it. It made me realize that I got choices here, and I might be taking the coward way, or I might be taking the way that my parents probably wouldn't have wanted me to take. And definitely my scout leader wouldn't have wanted me to take this way. It might have been the coward way, but it was the only coping mechanism that I could think to use at that time.
Did you even tell your brother?
I did not tell my brother,
So
no.
you told nobody?
I held on to this till 2006.
Wow.
We could talk about when I decided to do something about it then. But I guess I just viewed the consequences of making it a thing much harder on me, or the guess that it would be harder on me. It's not I don't sit here today saying it was the recommended way. I don't think it was. I think it's healthy today that we do trust the children more today. Yeah. And there's room for discussion on that. But
right.
I think in the year 1980, kids weren't believed like they are today. There was more reverence toward all churches, especially the Catholic Church. Then, like, people believed their church. They believed their pastor. They believed the amount of abuse that really actually happened, going back probably hundreds of years, but at least in the era that I grew up in, this little mill town, it wasn't just me.
No,
I am sure that many of my classmates either handled it like I did, or maybe they did come forward and it was hush-hushed. I mean, my thing was, it wasn't that I wasn't a fighter. I just think the only path I saw at that time for normality, because that's all I craved, was just to be normal so I wouldn't stand out, was to just deal with it my own way. As angry as I was, and I was angry, that was the only way that I saw that there was a chance to get normality again. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you kind of tried to bury it and move on. I mean, and how did that impact the rest of your life, having to deal with that?
I want to say, in some odd way, it was an extreme blessing. I don't wish that I went through it. And if it happened to my children, my stepchildren, anyone that I knew, I would be just broken as a parent, as a neighbor. If I was see that happen to anyone I know what my reaction would be today. But at that time, the only way forward was to get on with it.
I've witnessed it in the church. I went to Catholic school, and the priest there at the time took advantage of some kids at my school. And I remember being at one of the picnics, and it was like, "Where's Father so-and-so, and what's his name?" And years later, when it all came out, it was that last year, that one priest was on that list. So during that time, like you said, I'm sure it happened to a lot of people. So
I think so.
You sharing this right now, I think it can help a lot of people heal and cope, especially if they took the same path of burying it, because obviously you're bringing it up now. It's part of your healing. But you said all the way until 2006. That's 27 years.
Yeah. So
wow.
And I'm proud of the story afterwards, that moment in time. But by the year 2006, with a complex life, second wife, I got a business that took me across the country, and a business that required me to be on all the time and create. I think the stress of so much good happening, I just wasn't able to deal with it. And for whatever reason, in divine intervention, it was time that I sought help, that I sought to talk to somebody, to bring my parents into the fold and sit down with them and explain to them, as heart-wrenching as that was,
it was healing.
It was time. Yeah. And I'll go to my grave wondering if it was selfish of me to do that, or was it the right thing to do. I just don't know.
Well,
how
you
did
never
they
really respond know. When
lovingly, but I know it hurt my father and my mother very deeply. They felt they believed me, number one.
Yeah.
So my mother's still a devout Catholic, and my father was to a degree too. But so much had happened in that church that it was, and it was funny. I know I keep talking about the priest the year before when nothing really happened there. But that's where I believe had that been handled differently, there might have been an opportunity to talk to my folks then, you know what I mean, about what happened when it actually did happen from the scouter leader, the neighboring scouter leader. It would have been different. Mm-hmm. So I guess the moral of the story, if there is a moral, you really got to listen to your kids. So I always wanted to foster an environment with my children that, for all the mistakes I'm sure I made as a parent, the one thing I wanted to do is make sure they could talk to me. Yeah. I didn't want to hide things from them. I didn't want them to grow up too fast and have too much on their plate. But I didn't want to hide things from them. And I wanted them to always feel, because Dad is not hiding things from me. Right. I can go to him with anything.
That's understandable.
Because it would be just so heartbreaking to me to think of my children or my stepchildren going through that, because, and I wasn't an exceptionally strong kid. To me, it was just a miracle that's where I was able to go mentally, and knock on wood, it worked out. So I don't want to dwell on it, but that's part of my story, and I give you...
it's powerful.
I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to finally talk a little bit about it. Outside of counseling, outside of my family, a couple of my dearest friends during counseling know the story, but it is a part of my story, and I think I hope it can be helpful, even if someone is not going through that. Just hearing how a very confused 14-year-old kid, a middle of the road kid, was able to find some way to get on. Not that it was the right decision, and I wouldn't encourage that path. Right. For me, it was the only path that I saw at the time. Wow. And I think but I don't think I would be the person that I am or been able to maybe achieve certain things had that kind of stuff not happened to me. And I wouldn't have learned the lesson. Yeah, I think so. I think learning to throw a big middle finger to life when you need to occasionally, I don't think anybody grows into that. I think you learn that. You might learn it from a person, you might learn it from an experience, but that's served me pretty well.
As children, we want to do the right things, fit in, and if we listen, then we feel like we're doing the right thing. But sometimes listening isn't the right thing.
There's no question. And I do want to be very clear that in no way, shape, or form am I saying, Jamie, that my way is the right way. I'm not stating that the way I handled it was what a counselor, a doctor, a parent would suggest a child do at that moment, because I'm sure it isn't. Burying things, putting things aside, I'm sure is not the right way to heal. But for me, it was the only option I could see, and I made it work for the most part. Yeah. So I could get on with things. So
I mean, it appears to be so today. You're successful. You're doing quite well.
I'm okay. I got lucky. But that's a good part of it. So I just knew, and I think we talked off camera a while ago, and God loved this woman because she wanted this story, and I sat down with her, and I didn't tell her the whole story. She's hearing some of this for the first time, but the point was, I said, I really gotta, if you want to hear what happened, and I think I wanted to as well too, just to get it out, you're gonna hear it all, and I'm gonna tell you the unvarnished version, the good, the bad, the ugly, because I think everything that does happen, hook or crook, forms who you become.
Absolutely. And you asked me, you're like, is it okay if I share? Like, it's some deep stuff. And I was like, absolutely. Like, that's what this is for, to get that overcoming adversity is one of the biggest things that I want to focus on for inspiration and to help other people. Just real quick, and one thing that pushed me to do this, aside from working with the fighters a few years ago, but being a keynote speaker, when I was able to share my story,
Right.
I had about 6 people come up to me after, tears in their eyes, saying that I've helped them and they're going to try these things.
It's powerful.
It's very powerful. And what you did today, taking the time to share something that, really impacted you, can be embarrassing, and you buried it, and really it messed with your identity. I mean, at that age.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point, Jamie. I would be remiss to say that, I just cleaned myself up mentally and physically and went on with it. It ain't that simple.
Right.
Being 14 years old, blessed with good genetics, I had a thin build. We wear our hair longer those days. And my complexion was good, so I was getting female attention, which no young guy at 14 years old is going to push that away.
Right.
I was that part, that's all genetic stuff. I was blessed by that, I think. But, having a traumatic event like that at 14, you're not ready to cope with all the bigger picture questions. My sexual identity. Does this now mean that I'm purely heterosexual? Because I didn't have any inclination in the other direction. I just didn't have any.
Right.
So, and not being able to go talk to who was my best friend, my brother, and my best friend, my dad, and my mom, who had a good childhood. Loved these people. I mean, to this day, they were wonderful people in my story, my life. I should have been able to go to them. I just, the fear alone of losing that normality was overriding to me. And then not being believed prior because of circumstances, the year, the community, the church, the heavyweight of the church, whatever it was, that led me to that looking inward to try to figure it out. And I know we talked about like writings, we can talk about all kinds of stuff, but writings that impacted us, things that we read, just maybe a speech. I wasn't a literary kid. I wasn't even a kid that would even read a book, man, at that age, outside of a rock and roll magazine.
Right.
But I found myself in the library. I must have somehow wandered over, and it was either motivational material or somebody coping with abuse or whatever it was. But I read this passage, and I wish I could tell you who wrote it. And if somebody happens to know, it's a famous passage. But the passage was, I wanted the outcome of my life to be based on what I do, not what someone did to me. Wow. And somebody said that, and I can't tell you why I got that, but I read it and I'm like, holy shit.
It clicked.
Because in this town, in the early 80s, my mother and the Catholic Church, any church, wide variety of people, there was a consensus that if you just pray about it, it's going to work out. There was a consensus that when people lost their jobs, they just prayed about it, and it worked out. Now, I had a father who would get up at 4:30 in the morning and go run his own construction firm, or work in a warehouse, managing a warehouse, and get home like at 6, working 12, 14-hour days. There might have been praying going on, but there wasn't any wishful thinking. That man worked his ass off. I didn't see the whole connection between, praying and wishing and hoping and dreaming, and then sitting on your ass not doing about it. So I guess the bigger picture was I was going to figure my life out like my dad did, work his ass off. I wasn't going to be sitting around praying. And I saw a lot of people taking no action for their own life.
Wow.
Using excuses. Well, I lost my job, or, so-and-so got sick, or I learned at an early age, coming out of all that mess, that people were using things that happened to them, or just because they were unfucking lucky. Whatever the reason is, using that as an excuse for non-productivity, for not doing the things they could, they should, or they won't do.
Yeah, just accepting that
I wasn't going to live that way. And believe me, there wasn't motivational material, and I didn't know of a motivational speaker in the year 1983, 84. I didn't know that stuff, but I was not going to let somebody else hurt me or try to use me and then steer the course of what the fuck I wanted to do. It was going to be done on my own volition. Hook or crook, I was going to fail, and I did plenty, but I was going to do it out of my own volition. No one was going to tell me my life is going to be messed up because some guy decides to do what he wanted to do. His decision wasn't going to affect me.
You weren't playing the victim anymore.
I didn't know what that meant probably even at that age. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to be like those folks who just wished things would happen. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe that turned me a little sour toward religion, and I kind of feel bad about that. But all I saw of religion at that time was pray, 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 and things are going to get better. And instead of like work hard, give it to God, let it go, the whole photo.
Right.
But it was more on, the emphasis was more on, and it just, that whole, and we lived in this town, not to get too far off a tangent, Jamie, but we lived in a mill town that was repressed, like thousands of other towns in that era.
Yeah. Where
people who had, these mill town folks were loving people, and they had good incomes, and they were Southwestern PA. You had a boat maybe in the garage, and you took your vacation twice a year. That was normality. That was a good life, and it was a good life.
Yeah.
All of that was lost when those mills shut down. Wow. It was lost. So people were struggling. People were out of work for a long time. There was a lot of alcoholism. There was a lot of things because no one was prepared to deal with the difficult parts of life. Absolutely. You see? Yeah. And I was not going to come out of high school, even with maybe limited options. I wasn't going to come out, even if my options were limited, I wasn't going to let them be someone else's option. No one was going to fucking tell me that I have to do what they want to do. So maybe coming out of that personal mess, the one thing for me, while it may not have shown, because I still was very timid in a lot of ways, I had a personal understanding that I was going to do things on my own terms.
And that was at a younger age that you found that out. I remember in my late 20s, I read something, and I was into Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now.
Oh, yeah.
And being able to choose your thoughts to create your life. Mm-hmm. So that's a similar concept. You are going to decide.
Yes.
And you're going to create and not be a victim.
Yes.
And that's powerful. Like, it took me until my late 20s before I realized that we even had control of our own thoughts and what we wanted to do in life. And here you are, still in high school.
Well, I think events forced me to do that.
Right,
and
right.
You couldn't tell my story for what it's worth. You couldn't tell my story and not talk a little bit about philosophy and direction. Mm-hmm. I was reading in the late 80s, as I graduated school and I flunked out of college, because kids aren't going to do what they don't want to do.
Right. I
moved
understand.
out of my house when I was 17 because part of my healing process was to find my own way. Not recommended. I'm just saying it was my way.
Right.
I'm not saying it's the right way. It was my way. But I did start reading. And then reading album liner notes. And I ran across Ayn Rand, an author, a philosopher, I guess, coming out of the 20s and 30s from Germany. And she was a very empowered woman, Ayn Rand. I encourage anyone to look her up. But she was really into the philosophy of individualism. Now, it didn't really jive with the religion I was brought up with and so forth, but it really was about the power of the I, the power of the individual. You might have, she's wrote some rather towering novels. The Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged. She's written these big towering novels where she kind of weaves her philosophy in the novel. But there was a little skinny book that she also wrote that was nothing to do with a novel. It was a little, it could have been a self-help book. It could have been a book on philosophy. It was called The Virtue of Selfishness.
Wow.
And that title freaked me out because we're always taught that selfishness is a horrid thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't think she disputed that. But the selfishness she really was referring to was more to do with the grabbing yourself up by your bootstraps, understanding the power one individual can make if they have the courage. Mm-hmm. That book really left a big indelible mark on me at 20 years old. I must have read it 100 times. Like, it was really not even, and again, there wasn't an internet. There was really not great libraries around there in terms of big libraries, right? But I got a little paperback version, and no matter where I moved, and I moved a lot, because I moved out when I was 17, apartment to apartment to apartment to apartment to apartment, that book always seemed to go with me, The Virtue of Selfishness.
Wow, I think that's incredible because I grew up Roman Catholic, mm-hmm. and I just want to add to this, because mm-hmm. if we want to go into philosophy and
Sure.
religion and tie all
Absolutely.
these concepts together. The selfishness, the I am. In the Bible, what did they say God's name is? I am.
Mm-hmm.
And who are we as individuals? We are I. So it's like a manifestation of God himself through you
Yeah, I
to
read
be
that
your
too.
own creator.
I read that too. But the Bible to be so fascinating and at the same time very confusing because there's so much contradiction.
Right. Oh, absolutely. absolutely.
I thought philosophy was screwing me up,
Yeah.
and then you take philosophy. We won't go off that.
Well,
I'm a
my
philosophy
point was the power of I
Mm-hmm.
am, selfishness. Well, you are God within. Where do we get this life force from?
And I had that exact talk. Someone gave me that exact talk to what you're referring to. So there's a direct, and it comes up to human interpretation in the end, right?
Yeah.
But that little book, that the Virtue of Selfishness, it's a small read, paperback. Probably get it for 50 cents on Amazon if anybody's curious.
I'm going to check it out.
Yeah. Late 80s were really amazing time. I was still loving music, still loving my friends and enjoying life, going to baseball games, but I was just now also had a job. I just migrated toward a career path that had me work with other people, just to get other people happy with the service that I was in charge with representing or selling was the path for me.
And that's a gift. I mean, working with people is considered to be one of the most difficult jobs in life. Like, seriously, it has. I mean, I don't know if you saw, what was the movie with Vince Vaughn and Google?
Oh, I haven't seen that.
The Internship or something.
Yeah, I heard that's excellent.
It is excellent, but the point was, like, in the end, working with people is extremely difficult, and only certain people have those gifts.
It's a skill set.
It really is.
It is, and I think anything's possible. When I don't know how you feel about this, I'd love to hear. But when people say, you're born with it, or now, I definitely believe that we have an inclination that some things are easier to us than other things, like putting a mathematical formula on this table. I am not an analytical thinking person, so I'm going to struggle with that. But if I really wanted to figure it out, 7 weeks later, I could get to the right answer. So, but I think the people skills of learning learning to get joy out of the joy of others was such a beautiful gift that my parents inadvertently through genetics gave me, blessed from above, that I understood that other people's joy can also be my own joy. And when you learn that in business at a young age and you're willing to help and you're humble enough, I mean, you could be a cocky son of a bitch when you leave work, right? Or with your friends or at a bar or wherever. But during the work hours, humility was really like the number one thing to grow your career in a market that jobs were hard to come by.
Well, customer service. I mean, I don't know if the philosophy was then as it is now, but there's that mentality the customer's always right. So if you have an angry person on the phone, you really have to be humble and handle them, lightly in order to get your job done and keep the company happy.
So it's funny. It's a really good point. I have to mention this. So I was working. I had really great bosses in my life, and I'll throw names out because these names, without getting into details, they're just names of people that were really influential to my story. And Christine Rowe and Mary Coulter at RPS saw me as a 20-year-old kid that couldn't really even afford a suit. I think I went to the interview with like a dress shirt and white 1980s white dress slacks and like loafers because I didn't even have a suit. They saw something in me, and getting people to buy into your genuineness and then really truly being helpful.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the people that I was working with were degreed, had gone to school, couldn't find the job in their field they wanted. They were working at this job because they had to. I was working this job because I thought it was the gift of all time because I didn't have a degree. I was working with people with a master's degree. They were older than me. So it was a really odd circumstance that really served me well. I saw what being a grown-up really was. People with children, more stress on their life. I was this single guy just hoping to get enough money to pay my rent, buy groceries.
Yeah.
So I could devote a very unbiased work ethic. I didn't have the struggles of of what my older coworkers had. Their lives were already began. And it was a very interesting dynamic for me, and it gave me a leg up. And I wanted, and at that moment in the late 80s, early 90s, my goal was to outperform, outwork, be a better employee than my coworkers. Not in a way that they would ever know. I could be the nicest person on the planet. They think, oh, that Eric McKenna is a sweetheart of a kid. I hear it all the time. Meanwhile, inside, I'm like, I won't cut your throat. Because to me, it was all competition.
Right.
Not hurtful competition, healthy competition.
Yeah.
But I am not going to, when they said I couldn't do that job or I didn't have the skill set, I'll prove them wrong. I'll prove them wrong. I'll prove this one's got a master's degree. I'll outperform them. This one, got two has two bachelor's degrees, double major. That's all they talk about. I'll outperform her. That's where that underdog kind of thing really, for me, I was fueled by it. I was motivated by it. And the economy was not great. I think it kind of pushed me. Make any sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did that take you into the next phase of your life? Like, did you get married, or did you go into another position?
Was turning 30 years old, like in 96. I saw it coming. And of course, it was just my brother and I. There was no grandchildren. There was no extended family. I think coming from half an Italian family, I was hearing it constantly, you're going to be 30 years old. There's no,
Yeah.
I laugh at it now, but there's a lot to that with very ethnic families. Oftentimes they want grandchildren. You're put on this earth to procreate, and I wasn't sure I could even take care of myself, let alone a child. That was the last thing I was thinking about.
I feel like that right now. Two kids.
I feel like that some days I wake up, I'm 54 years old. I was wired for sound and just would sleep 3 hours, and I was constantly fascinated by stuff like sports and music and what this kid was doing, what this guy was doing, this story, that story. Loved just people. I just ate it up. I ate up people's stories. I ate up just the vivaciousness of life. I wanted to just get it all, and never wanted to miss out on anything. And it wasn't really ever about drugs or alcohol for me. They never really played a major role in my life. I just was more about the human interaction, just a very vivacious appetite for human connection. I didn't let any moss grow under my feet. Leave it at that. My younger brother, my splitting image in many ways, Brian also was 180 degrees different from me. He was absolutely, I won't say he was nuts, but where I would go to the edge and pull it back sensibly and get on my way to safety, he would take it a little further. Brian would live life a little further toward that edge. Sadly, in the spring of 96, I lost him to narcotics. We lost him to drug addiction, which, and he was a degreed person, something I never accomplished. He was, I think, a runner-up to Mr. Pittsburgh in I think, 89. That's where we ended up meeting the Manions. I think Brian's claim to fame was that he had lied about his age on the application. He was too young. Sorry, Mr. Manion, if that happened. I don't know. But that whole, we championed all the things that he wanted to do, and he lived his life with a lot of vivaciousness. He's only around for 26 years, but he got his money's worth. So losing him in 96 was just devastating.
Oh, I can't imagine.
It was...
And to that, it's not like it was an accident or a disease that you saw coming. It was something that, at that time, before we really understood more about it, like, we assumed that they have complete control over that, and that was a choice. Is that how you felt about it, or you understood it more in depth?
That's a great question.
I have some experience in these areas.
It's and I've gone like this over the years. So for me, life has always been about personal responsibility. You make your bed, you effing lay in it. A lot of bad stuff had happened to me, going back to when I was 14, but then I'd lost jobs, gotten jobs, I'd made my own opportunities, I've had doors slammed in my face. I had lived a lot more of real life, I had presumed, than what my brother had done to that point. So I was the older brother, lecturing constantly, lecturing about the fast lifestyle, lecturing about the harms of drugs, lecturing about what I thought my brother was really effing up his life. And this has gone on, for a couple of years, in spite of the fact of him having more education than me, him getting white-collar jobs based upon his ability to to turn on the charm or having that paper. So in other ways in his life, he was outperforming me, which I was proud of.
Yeah.
Never told him enough of that. And life is short, friends. Life is very short. Always remember that life is short, and you never have enough time to tell you never have enough time to communicate with your family because life is short. But I think, to get back to your point, I think that he made his bed and he lied in it. And the way I've dealt with his demise is that I had immediately at that time, I didn't have any children at that time. I wasn't even married quite yet. But I made it a fact that I was going to do everything in my power to steer my kids away from narcotics of any kind. And knock on wood, I've done the best I can do. It's out of my hands now.
Yeah.
But I've done the best of that. But I saw the deadly dangers of what was coming for the whole society. I mean, not that heroin was a new drug in '96, but it wasn't then what it is today.
Right.
Does that make any sense? Like, kids weren't, in my sphere, weren't dying of heroin in '96. That was a really whacked out kind of effing thing. Raves were starting. That whole kind of like take pills, zone out kind of culture was starting. But, you know, maybe a cocaine overdose, maybe some other kind of drug, but to get heroin, it was a really eye-opening thing for me. Having my brother die from that, Jaime, and then the idea of like, man, he must have shot that up, and then getting the coroner's report, and then reading the coroner's report to this day is a very private thing for me, but it just still horrifying. Like, I could not believe what I was reading to this day. That can't be anyone that I even know, let alone my own sibling.
Right.
So the way I dealt with that is I have to say we all have personal responsibility, and it was a path he chose. It's harsh, but
You know, I mean, just for the purposes of how he died and it being heroin, I actually covered a young man in Your Face MMA. He was a fighter, and he died very young from a heroin overdose.
Right.
And his mother, she became a big advocate and did a lot of research. And I had the wonderful ability to speak with this woman who educated me. And, I mean, this is what I learned from her, that one time of doing heroin can rewire your neurotransmitters.
I was told that.
And change your brain chemistry, and then that's what made addiction become a disease. Because when I first learned about this, seeing my friends die, I mean, I've had over 10 people die from drugs. And seeing people die throughout the years, I was angry.
Yeah.
That they did that to themselves. But after speaking with Pam and how she articulated it, it gave me a great understanding and more compassion for people who are struggling with drug addiction. It does change the brain chemistry. Not that that's an excuse.
Yeah.
Because habit can change brain chemistry too. So I'm urging people to look into that. Maybe it'll help them understand.
And it's a good point. And it's a good point, too. And that, that's a good point. I think I was very hard on my brother, if this makes any sense. Once he passed, I was very hard on him for a long time. Like, I was mad. Like, Brian, how could you do this?
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
And it was probably just misplaced grief, I would imagine. But that personal responsibility thing has always been so ingrained in me. Came from my father and his father and my grandmother on that side, and my grandparents on the other side as well. Hardworking people. Yeah,
I mean, it should with personal responsibility.
Yeah, but I really have a fierce. I don't know. There's something weird about me where it's a really. I'm very much into a no excuses life. And when you get older and you get tired and life keeps smacking you in the face, it's easy to fall into the excuse trap. And I am not perfect. I am not perfect. So, but I lived my life that way. And I can remember one thing I loved about my father was that he never made an excuse, at least not in earshot of me or my brother. And so that no excuses kind of lifestyle doesn't mean that you're going to be rich and famous and ultra motivated. No, it doesn't mean any of that. It just means that regardless of where your stature in life is, you're going to take responsibility for it and you're going to get on with it. Yeah. And that part of getting on with it of my life, I'm proud of, because there's lots of disappointments. There's disappointments every day of your life, but that has served me well that you tuck and roll. You just go. You go to the next thing. Because I watched good friends of mine, some of you aren't even with me anymore, live lives of quiet desperation at times from my vantage point because they just let life roll over them. And they were smarter than me. They had more going for them. They were better looking than me. They had all these things going for them, but life would roll them over. Life would pop you in the face. Well, you're a fighter, you get that analogy. You know, everybody's got a plan until they get popped in the face. And Mike Tyson said that, right? But it's true.
Yes.
You know, you don't have a plan. These people around me that I love dearly, but they didn't have an effing plan because life would continually pop them in the face and they'd fall to the mat. And that was not how I wanted to live. Not that I was going to make $1 million, not that my decisions were going to be right, because I have my fair share of stumbles. But I wasn't going to let life smack me in the face and not get the fuck off the mat. That's I guess in a nutshell, that's kind of where it was. And pulling myself out of that mess when I was 14, that was the ultimate climb off the mat. Not knowing what the hell I was climbing into.
Yeah.
But I figured if I could make a decision of that magnitude at that age, how at 22, at 28, 30, 35, how could I make decisions out of fear?
After you've already been through.
I've already been through a lot of shit, you know?
It changes you, doesn't it?
It does change you. It doesn't make you perfect. It doesn't make you wealthy. Those things don't make you a certain way. It just gives you a different outlook and maybe a little different personality. I 100% plead guilty to wanting a better life for my children than I had. Well, there was nothing really wrong with my life. I didn't have a lot. No one around me had a lot. Nobody had any money. So we were all the same. I pride myself on a lot of good decisions that I've made. Too bad. But I pride myself on the good ones. And then I go and I have two kids. I throw the rules right out the fucking window. Have kids. You'll throw your entire philosophy right out the window. I held my son for the first time. I'm going to buy this kid a Lamborghini. I'm going to give this kid everything. And I guess part of it's funny because you love that little creature so much.
It's so true.
But at the same time, we equate success. We equate accomplishment. We sadly equate happiness, a lot of us.
With material.
Me, I'm guilty of that. With material stuff, with trinkets, a watch, a new sports coat, a pair of shoes. What I'm saying is, it's a trinket of success only for you. Because what I learned quickly, which no young person will believe me, you have to learn for themselves. I wish they would believe me, but in the end, no one really cares.
Right. You can't take it with you.
So if you better really like that thing you bought, you better be in love with that inanimate object over there, because really, outside of the first time that your friend sees it and then lusts after it for about 30 seconds, no one gives a shit.
Exactly.
All the material stuff we end up acquiring and storing and coveting and sleeping with half the time because we love these things so much. Nobody cares. Consumerism, and I'm 54, so I lived the whole gamut. It started, I'm sure, decades even prior than that. But you're the fields you grew up, you became an adult in advertising. I mean, you know it 1,000 times better than I about
my job to push products and things and
in the 80s there was infomercials and it was you're constantly being sold image. I was the schmuck at 24 years old and bought a Rolex. And that wasn't good enough. I bought a second one. I couldn't afford it, but I bought it. I had to have that thing, right? Because I was working with accomplished people who had those things, and I perceived that to be success. My Ralph Lauren shirts that I couldn't afford. I couldn't eat, but I could get that $52 Ralph Lauren shirt, right? Really misplaced. I laugh about it now, but I knew better. Yeah. But then you have a child, and then you take him to Dick's Sporting Goods, you buy him the best baseball bat, the best glove, and my kids are driving nicer cars than I'm driving right now. You always want to do things for your children.
It's so...
Because we perceive it to be better than what we were given. Meanwhile, there was nothing wrong with the way we were raised.
Right.
There probably was a better way to live, right?
I can agree to that. Less technology, less having that pushed on you daily.
Things started happening for me. Breaks started to go my way, which, not that I sat on the edge of my bed and said, woe is me, why aren't breaks going my way? I wasn't really thinking about it, but I started to notice years in, like, wow, this broke for me, this broke for me, this broke for me. Things started to change. Now, if, like Jim Rohn would say, he would say, your life will change for you if you change. And maybe I was just changing in a way. I was changing. But
how so?
So he passed, and this, we talk about moments again, right? I found Jim Rohn. I was searching and searching for something to read, and as embarrassing as this is going to sound, but I was grieving. I was drinking a little more than I typically ever did. I was trying to, I was getting ready to get married. The wedding came right around the time he passed. Wow. And I was just searching, looking at these self-help books in a carousel wheel at the checkout at a grocery store. Eckhart Tolle and Wayne Dyer, all good stuff. Nothing was really resonating with me. Nothing. Anthony Robbins has an infomercial. Why not try this? Maybe this will right. I buy the Unlimited Power book by Anthony Robbins. I think it was the first book he read, which at that time was 10 years old. I'm reading it. It's kind of good. Still not resonating. So...
But you're searching.
I'm searching.
Yes.
I had a friend of mine. I must have said to him, who trained the trainer? Because that's probably, and even before him, who trained him? Where did it start? Or let me go back at least and find out where the origin of this good material is. Maybe they'll resonate with me. And just by luck, the man who Tony Robbins worked for, his name was Jim Rohn. An older gentleman at that time, probably 30 or 40 years my senior. And I bought a book by Jim Rohn. And I think I read it in an hour and a half. It was almost written like a children's book. I was almost embarrassed to buy this book for $15 because there was nothing to it. I must have read that thing 100 times because it's so simple. You're just not doing the fundamentals. You're missing everything. I got more. I bought a cassette program with Jim Rohn. I just could not get enough of this man. And it really started me analyzing my life. And I was making not a wholesale change because I don't think any human can make a wholesale change. It's hard, right? To change everything at once.
Yeah.
Anthony Robbins talks about massive change. You'll go nuts. If you try to change your entire life in one, believe me, I've tried. If you try to change everything at once, you'll go crazy. But if you make concerted efforts to make changes slowly in different parts of your life over time, and you track it, it'll work. I just think that the first question I realized that Rohn was asking his listeners, what is your personal philosophy? Do you have a personal philosophy? Why is it important? Because he was sharing his experience that his life changed when his mentor was saying, get right with yourself. Get right with what you believe. What do you believe? In 1997, I had made it out of Coriopolis, right? A lot to be happy for, but grieving, really the loss of my best buddy and just disillusioned. What the fuck did I believe? I was indifferent completely. But was I lying to myself, or was I really grounded? Was I really principled? Did I have a philosophy and I didn't know it? Did I know it? Was I hiding it? It was all that self-exploratory stuff that Rohn asked the right questions. And there was no easy answers and no quick answers, but I began to form a principled way of looking at my life. At the same time, I know we've shared this story. It's kind of funny. I went to Mexico. My wife and I went to Mexico, and I went to this resort, and you meet people for the right reasons, right? I remember the gentleman's name. His name was Ira. He was from New York, and yes, he was a jeweler. And he had a very thick New York accent, and his wife, forgive me, this was 1997, I think, and he basically asked me, am I happy? And he goes, why are you not happy? what makes you happy? And then when I said, oh, well, people make me happy, cursory answer. He goes, what makes you happy? Don't bullshit me or yourself. I'm like, okay. I thought about it, and all I could come up with was rock and roll and guitars and music, and that whole thing is the one thing I go to in my time of solace is rock and roll music.
Wow. Yeah.
And he looked at me, and he goes, play guitar. I said, well, I play the drums. I can do that a little bit in the saxophone. And I was making an excuse. He goes, well, if you can do those two, the guitar should be easy. If that's what you really love, go home and get a guitar and play. Call your friend, have him give you lessons. Go pay for lessons. Go learn guitar. Find out what you're passionate about. So his bravado had kicked in, and he's a successful jeweler, and he has these many stores. And I wanted not to be a jeweler. The Rolex was nice. Yeah. I didn't lust for any of the material trinkets. What I wanted was the passion this man had for life. The passion that he had for jewelry. I wanted to find that for something. But what the fuck was I passionate about?
Yeah.
This man turned me on or get me to think about being passionate about something. I went home, bought that guitar, Jamie. I didn't put it down. Believing in that instrument was part of my being was so vital to everything that happened afterwards, which I will get
So you
into.
tapped into your true passion, and then, so for the audience to understand, that ended up becoming your career.
Yes.
So tell us about that transition from the time you picked up that guitar, didn't put it down.
Late 90s, I wanted to buy a guitar for myself. You know, we were doing okay. We had money. And I had bought this $300 guitar to start, and I was playing this acoustic almost like an electric. I was beating this thing, you know. I was playing along. I was sweaty. I was playing along with the records I'd grown up with, right? I got to get an electric guitar. Now I got to get an electric guitar because the acoustic's just not doing it anymore. Long story short is I went to a local place, and I bought a Stratocaster. It was blue. It was a Fender. It looked amazing. I'm thinking, this is all right. I think I paid like $950 for it, right? And we had the money, but still, it's $950.
Yeah.
I bring it home, I plug it in. I'm like, I hate this thing. Oh,
Really?
It just
You
wasn't.
hated it?
Yeah, it was a Fender. It was like I realized right away that Fenders were not for me. Fine instrument, beautiful instrument, just not for me. Now I'm screwed because I bought it with a joint credit card. I can't hide it from my wife. She's going to see this thing, and I'll take it back. Take it back.
Yeah.
Get my money back. Get something else, maybe. Take it back. It was a used guitar when I bought it. You couldn't take it back.
Oh.
Now I got like a couple days before the statement gets here. I'm horrified, you know, in a joking kind of way. But I didn't want to have that conversation.
Right.
So this thing called eBay there was commercials for it, and people were like selling stuff on eBay. I'm like, oh, what the hell? I bought a little digital camera, like a 1 megapixel camera, whatever the hell it was. Took these grainy photographs and I put it up on this eBay thing. And it started getting bid up all the way up, and I'm like, there's no one that's going to pay me like over what I paid for this thing, right? It went all the way to $1,700 and some dollars.
And you bought it for what?
Like $900.
Wow.
And I'm like, no one's going to send me a certified check. I'm like some schmuck in Moon Township throwing it. How do they even know that I'm a real person? How do they know the guitar is actually in existence? I just joined eBay. The guy wins the auction. Calls me on the phone. My phone number was there, and I'm not kidding you, he lived in a mobile home in Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
Nicest guy in the world. In my brain, I'm going, okay, there's a guy in a mobile home in Wisconsin that's going to send me a cashier's check. I get this check. I take it to my credit union, and she's like, oh, it's real. I'm like, nah, the credit union doesn't know. I take it to PNC.
Yeah.
Is this real? I'm like, yes, Mr. McKenna, this is a real, $1,700 check. The point was, I knew at that point something was going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't hard the capitalism in me and the capitalist in me, and
you almost doubled your money.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah. So and I was selling pagers at the time. Loved my co-workers. I had this half the Steelers of the late '90s were my clients. I was trading pager airtime for tickets. Life was good.
Yeah,
life was good. But this guitar thing it had me in the grips of it. And once I started buying, I was buying in volume. I took that credit card I was worried about spending, and I was spending $12,000 on it because I could turn the
12
inventory over,
Yeah.
and I was making money hand over fist. It was the money helped. The money helped too. Yeah, the
Yeah.
money in terms of, it was exciting.
Yeah, well,
You know, it was
absolutely.
exciting. The entrepreneur thing, the connection with my dad and his dad. And I came by it naturally. And just when I was getting ready to give my resignation, the month before I had my annual review. And at that time I was a sales director of some region or something. I don't like managing anybody. I'm unmanageable. I don't want to manage anybody else. The point was, it was a lot of money for me. And I convinced my wife to let me walk away from that and start to sell guitars on the interwebs at a thing called eBay. How she let me do that, I have no idea. But all the things that I love, that creativity, the excitement of it, making money under my own volition, going back to that thing of having life be on my own terms, of what I do and not what someone's done to me. Because when you're working for someone, it's exciting, but you never really feel like you're in control.
Yeah.
And so entrepreneurship gave me this total control, for better or worse, but everything was up to me. And I just never looked back. I just left in January of 2000. Yeah, so it was a hell of a start.
How long did you do that for? Like, when did you register your LLC?
Yeah,
Was it an LLC for Boogie Street
Yeah.
Studios?
So
That's
it was
what you
so
called it?
Boogie Street was the name of the business that I just came to, and we were Boogie Street on Facebook and all that stuff. Diane and I split. Sadly, at the time, after my second child was born. I knew I wanted to be a great dad. She was a great mother. We were extremely good friends on top of being married. So the friendship part of it has remained stellar to this day, knock on wood. But, probably I was deluded into believing my own bullshit. And that's what success will do to you at times, if it's unbridled and it's not contained. I was just so passionate about Boogie Street that I thought I did. I wanted a different thing in life. I wanted to travel. I wanted to grow this business. We just sat down and figured it out. It's not recommended. Divorce is not recommended, I don't think, for anyone. I hope my children don't go that direction. But it was as good as it could be under the circumstances. Make any sense?
Well, you were blessed. That sounds like a blessing in the way it...
I think so. So after Gwen was born, a couple months later, I moved to Mount Lebanon, and I ended up renting space in Rossland Farms next to Froggy Radio. And NVR was the name of the mortgage company that was in the building. They were moving out. Froggy had most of the building, but there was a big, just under 3,000 square feet of office space sitting empty. I took it. Now, what deluded me into believing that I was going to make that work, I have no idea. I got this idea that I was deluded into believing that I knew what kids wanted to play. I would say, Gibson's making these 5 guitars and Fender's making these 5, and they're selling pretty good, but a lot of them were ugly to me.
Yeah.
They weren't. What if we took those body shapes and really made them cool looking? At least what I thought was cool looking, and kids would buy them, and we could go overseas and make some at lower price points so kids would be able to get the guitars they wanted. And they were custom, they were real, they were something different, unique, and I put this plan together. I'm arrogant, right? I'm Eric McKenna. I'm successful.
Well, you're passionate about...
I love the industry.
Yeah.
Who knows better than me, right? So what happened? I put this plan together. I make an appointment with Gibson. I get smacked in the face. I make an appointment with Fender, and they politely smack me in the face. Peavy on my list. Hartley Peavy, no interest, And I get it. I went to Paul Reed Smith and then 2 other, my list of people that I was going to, my list of guitar manufacturers that I wanted to work with.
So you've at that point seen 5 or 6 different manufacturers. And you didn't quit.
Before.
7?
Yeah.
And you didn't quit after the first 2 or 3 no's?
No, I was either arrogant, believing my own crap, or I was just stubborn. I believed in that I could make this work. The plan was to let a manufacturer give me number one, make me an online dealer. They didn't exist at that time, right? So maybe an online dealer, and then and no walk-in business. So I'm not going to have a guitar store. No one's going to walk in and buy something off the internet. We advertise on the internet. We sell on the internet. Well, they all turned me down. Washburn Guitars was my last hope. They were not even a brand I was even enthused about.
Yeah.
But they were in Chicago. I went to Chicago aimlessly. Took a deep breath, walked in the front door.
So aimlessly, you didn't have an appointment?
No.
So you go to cold call the 8th dealer.
Yes, the eighth one.
The 8th?
The only one I didn't have an appointment
manufacturer.
with. I got an appointment with all 7 of the prior ones.
But you just took this trip to Chicago blindly.
I might not be able. What if they say no on the phone? I wasn't going to take that chance. I wanted someone to look me in the eye
and tell you
for the final attempt. I walked in the front door, and I wasn't even a big fan of their instruments. I didn't own one. It wasn't until years later I realized how good they were. Really. I walked in the front door, and the salesman come down the stair. Beautiful showroom, big, and there was a manufacturing facility. There was a warehousing facility. There was a custom shop. I was amazed how big this facility was. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And down this staircase come bebopping this young guy, and he looks at me, and I'm just waving at him, and I was talking to the receptionist, getting ready to get my spiel to talk to the big boss.
Yeah.
And the guy looks at me. Steve Bennett was his name. Are you Eric McKenna? I go, yeah, I am. How do you know? Did the Boogie Street hat give it away? The hat that said, I'm Eric McKenna. And he ended up being so instrumental. He was a sales director there. Wow. And he said, you want to become a dealer? I said, yeah, but I don't have a walk-in store. I want to do it all internet only, but I also want to customize your guitars. He goes, I got to introduce you to Rudy. He takes me, forget the reception, takes me up the stairs, and I walk over to this cubicle. It was a big cubicle, but it was a cubicle. And there's an older gentleman, an Austrian, very well-tailored and nice-looking older gentleman sitting there. Sorry, Rudy. You're older than me, so you're older. And it got introduced to Rudy Schlocker, who was the president of Washburn, U.S. Music, Randall Amplifiers. He had bought into the whole company, and he was working from a cubicle. That unpretentiousness really resonated with me. And then he just took me to lunch, and we talked about my ideas, and Bennett wanted my account, of course. That's why he had, I know Bennett wanted my account. But I got back salesman there. Later that day. I left Mundelein, Illinois, with an agreement that I would work with them. If I would meet so many markers and achievement, I would be an exclusive dealer for these amounts of guitars. But the thing was, Jaime, what I wanted was the ability to work with the artists. Yeah, I wanted to meet rock stars, but I wanted to work with them and say, hey, Roger Waters, you designed this guitar with Washburn. I was going to tell him it's ugly as shit. We can do better. Bootsy Collins, that's a funky looking bass you're making with Washburn, but why aren't they selling? Finding ways to interact with their artist people, the artist, and say, look, I'm a dealer who wants to champion these guitars, but you got to make them look better. Yeah. They got to be built better. They got to be more palatable to the kids. People got to buy them. Yeah. If they're not going to buy them, why do it? It just worked. Sammy Hagar, the Red Rocker. There was Roger Waters of Pink Floyd. These are people in the beginning. And that was good enough for me. I was happy. Bootsy Collins, Roger Waters, just that interaction was like, I was over the moon. And then a year later, there was Scotty of Anthrax, Nuno Betancourt of Extreme. There was all these other and more. And I'm going to Chicago. And I had remarried at the time, and my wife and I at the time were going to Chicago. We're going to Los Angeles, where this whole little world just opened up. It was nuts. Like, how in the hell is this happening? Yeah. A lot of luck involved, but it goes back to believing in yourself and having the courage to ask.
That's more than luck. I mean,
you make your own luck.
You created your own. You didn't take no for an answer. You kept going, and the 8th one. What do they say in sales? It takes 8 to 12 contacts to get a close.
There you go.
It's usually with the same person, though. He went to 8 different people. So that's fascinating.
And there was doubt. Like, driving to Chicago. I'll never forget. It's like 9 hours. Like, I'm driving across Ohio. Like, what am I doing? Like, my wife at the time believed that I was stubborn. She didn't know anything about what I was doing, but she believed that I was stubborn enough to keep going till it worked. But I had those doubts when you have a door slammed in your face 7 times prior over like maybe a 3-month period. Mm-hmm. And I won't say which manufacturer it was, but one manufacturer that the representative I met with laughed at how arrogant they thought I was. That like, we don't need you.
Yeah.
Who are you? So you sell used guitars on the internet. Why would we buy into your plan? You know, and I was like, well, fuck you. I know what I'm doing. I mean,
Right.
you know, but he was right. I was just some guy with an idea, and I was asking them to change the core way they did business. And I had no right to do that, but that's how.
But you saw
But
that there
that's
was
how
a
things
need.
change.
You-
That's how things
yeah.
change. Having the stones to say that things aren't the core way of doing things, or the usual way might not be the best way.
Yeah.
And it was just, I was having a time of my life. I thought, anyways. You know, we'll talk about that. You know, about attitudes, but it all worked out great. So in 2006, I was in Chicago having a dinner with the brass at Washburn, and they treated me so good. I mean, it was almost a joke.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at Rudy, the president of Washburn. I said, "Hey, would you bring Paul Stanley of Kiss back?" Now, you bring Paul Stanley of Kiss, Rudy, being this big Kiss fanatic I was growing up, my childhood hero. You bring him back. You think I'm selling guitars now? I'll get behind those. I'll sell 10,000 the first year, which was a crazy number. Crazy number. A couple weeks later, Larry English, another great guy at Washburn, calls me and starts. I thought it was a social call. Hey, Larry, how you doing? I'm doing things in my office. My kids are playing, you know, on the floor probably with toys. And he goes, I got someone on the line. It's a 3-way call. He wants to talk to you. And I didn't hear him. I'm like, hey, so what's going on, Larry? He goes, did you hear me? I have someone on the line that wants to say hello to you. I went, and I stopped. I said, okay. And I hear this, hey, Eric, it's Paul Stanley. I'm like,
Wow.
wait, what? So in the end of that whole conversation, being blown off.
Your
blown
childhood
away.
hero.
Yeah, blown away. And by the end of that conversation, he was coming back to Washburn. He was calling me from Japan because Kiss was doing a couple shows in Japan, and they were building him a new guitar, and him and I were going to do all this stuff, and I was going to champion, and his son, Evan, Paul's son, Evan, had found me on the internet. This guy in Pittsburgh is a big Paul Stanley fan. Dad, he's got this company called Boogie Street. It's just all these planets were lining up, right? And so at that time, all was to be happy for. Well, trust me, life was enchanted. I felt I really still wasn't happy. And I made a decision, I know I've kind of mentioned to you prior, that I had to get right with myself. I was going to take this next step and start working with this crazy rock star and changing my production and making it bigger and going to Los Angeles. I just knew I wasn't right still.
So back to Ira, when he asked you or observed that you truly weren't happy, you took
He probably was still right.
Yeah, but he was able to identify that you weren't doing something that you were passionate about to the level of what your true passion is, aside from people.
I think so.
So you were able to tie in your passion with guitars and people, move forward.
Had every reason to be happy.
Every reason to be happy. You're on the line with your childhood hero, and then
Making plans to make money and go to shows and go hang out with them.
a dream come true.
Yeah.
But then here you realized at that point that you needed to get yourself right.
Yeah. I knew because what was happening to me, and it wasn't to do with any kind of philosophy. Really, it was just how I was living my life. As I was not letting the highs be real high. I guess it's the Buddhist way, right? You live in the middle, supposedly.
Listen, the
maybe.
middle way. I
don't know.
never liked that philosophy. Okay, the Eckhart Tolle and the middle way. I thought, how boring of a life is that without the high highs? You need the low lows to understand how good the highs
That's the
can
juice
be.
of life. To
Yes.
me. And I was not, and I wasn't doing it for any religious bent. I was doing it because I thought maybe I had some fear in me that I was always afraid that impending doom was on the way. My parents would argue it was all that Black Sabbath music I listened to as a kid. I just think it was things that had happened in my life that there was going to be, that's great, but wow, that's amazing. But, because I remember getting off that phone call with Paul and him telling me, put my number, this is my private phone, then put it in your phone book. Make sure you have it in your phone. Like, do you realize how, like, knocked off my feet I was at that moment? To some people, Paul Stanley's not a big deal. But in my little world of music and Kiss, that was, like,
The biggest
insane,
deal.
the biggest deal. But I think I was just always a little fearful. I knew that I had to get right. So in the height of everyone thinking I have everything going for me, my folks, my friends, my vendors, my landlord, my friends at Froggy, everybody thinking life is just great, I went and sought help. And I realized...
What kind of help?
A psychiatrist.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to... Because there was two. I ended up firing one of them. Both wonderful people. But it took me 2 psychiatrists to find out where I was comfortable. The point was, I knew I was unsettled. And it was through therapy, especially with the second psychiatrist, where when I was comfortable, that it was time that I addressed what had happened to me when I was young. It was time that I no longer hide that from my parents. And whether it was the right decision or the wrong decision, I still struggle with out of my love for them. Was it right it was at the time? But I brought both of them in. They both were extremely loving. They were extremely devastated to learn 20-some years, that would be 25 years later, that happened. But once they understood and they knew the participant and they knew the scenario and the timing of it all, everything made sense. In some weird way, it made sense. So through a lot of tears and through a lot of reflection, I thought I was doing the right thing of getting right with it, and I think I probably was. Causing my parents pain was really... They have told me multiple times they're both okay with it. I just lost my father, but to hear them say they were more happy, I think, for me to get it out. And it was like taking a 800-pound weight off my shoulders, because no matter what I would do, every once in a while, the fear of that it wasn't like a flashback, but I mean, it would come back. It would surface privately, and it would. So that was very healthy to do.
The healing process, and I have to point this out. I know you recently lost your father. I did it as well. I lost mine in November. So this is our first Father's Day.
Yes, it is.
Without our fathers, and here we are participating in this wonderful healing story of yours.
I think so.
So I think it's a beautiful thing that I just wanted to acknowledge.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I've struggled for a long time about revealing this story, but I think I just wanted to share it, because how can I talk about all these crazy things that have happened, most of them good, in my adult life, but also not talk about what motivated me to take some chances.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because out of good, I think, came a hell of a lot of positive.
Yeah, I mean, you were able to overcome certain fears because of these things that have happened, and that's powerful. And look what you've accomplished.
Yeah.
Your passion. You were able to live your passion. So
there's no question.
After meeting with those therapists and realizing that you have your dream right here in front of you, were you able to experience that fully and true happiness?
I think so. After therapy, and there was an after therapy. I'm not one of these people that believe that therapy has to be lifelong. I don't. My life isn't that interesting enough, even to myself, that I can make a life out of talking about it. People do. Stanley had asked me to hey, you know what, we're going to be in Pittsburgh and Binghamton, New York, and Cleveland, that whole region around you. Why not come out to the show? Bring your camera. You like to take pictures, right? Because he would see on my website, I was a budding photographer, amateur. But I loved it.
Yeah.
I take pictures of my kids, so I started taking pictures of kids. Well, he started liking the photos. And he let me sit in the pit taking pictures the whole show. Like, I had carte blanche. I could go anywhere. I was Paul's guest on the lanyard. You know how crazy this stuff is? So that photography.
Do you still have that lanyard?
I got them. Yeah, they're probably over there. That whole thing, it transcended instruments. It transcended Boogie Street. It transcended commerce. It became part of my being. Like, something really special is happening to me for some reason, unbeknownst to me. Boogie Street was great. I ended up getting a divorce from my second wife, unfortunately, right around the time that the market collapsed. If you remember the
2008.
Housing market. Yeah, 8, 9. I still to this day really don't know what happened there. Obviously, she wanted something different, so we went our separate ways. I can't say it wasn't without pain and it didn't sting. It definitely stung on a lot of fronts. But where I could have really gone into a deep, bad place of hard feelings and hurt, because I think there was enough justifiable reason to do that or wallow in my own misery. I made the conscious decision that I haven't lived my life really that way prior. I'm not going to start now. And 2008, 9, 10, watching my kids grow up, being participatory in their school activities, moving Boogie Street to an office space in Moon Township, still private, but in Moon Township, living my life on my own terms, becoming a single man at 45, 46. I mean, there was a lot of newness, a lot of strangeness.
Yes, I can
being
imagine.
a single as a middle-aged person is not where it's not easy.
15 years of 2 relationships in 15 years. I've had similar stories, so I can relate, And,
it's not easy.
You're married again?
Yes. So I ended up married. Yeah. So I hope so. I still running my business, although it was hard. We gutted through the downturn of 07, 08, 09, 10 because, guitars are a luxury item.
Yeah.
Even if to a kid of humble means, it's still a luxury item, meaning they don't need that to eat. They don't need that to pay rent. It's a luxury item for everybody. Well, when people's 401ks were drying out, their
houses, and
guitars were the last thing on people's minds.
Right.
And I was the king of making expensive custom pieces that were $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. Those guitars weren't flying off the shelf. So I found a way, and Paul had now become a friend. I mean, like he was. When I say the following, I'll share it. I won't get into specifics, but the man was calling me and then writing me long emails and recommending therapists for my divorce.
Wow.
He took that kind of interest in telling me to protect my children. Mm-hmm. He was in Pittsburgh in 2010. I spent an hour and a half with him before a show in his dressing room, sitting there just talking about life. How you holding up? I felt like I'm not as close to him anymore. Business life has taken us different places, but that time he was another part of the puzzle for me. Mm-hmm. Now you say that to a couple guys sitting around the bar, Paul Stanley was even helping me through my divorce. They laugh at you because that story as a standalone story is bizarre, but not if you know the whole context of the man came into my life and was so generous and helped me earn a living, helped me create great stuff, and became like a voice of reason in a time that I probably really needed it. And I would venture to say, too, that I would be neglectful in this, that out of that relationship with Paul and Washburn came another wonderful friendship that is still alive, very much alive in my life to this day, is Paul's guitar technician and personal handler, Fran Stuber, who's been with Kiss since the 90s, became an amazing friend. He was a liaison. When I couldn't reach Paul for something business related, I'd go through Fran, and this friendship just blossomed. And to this day, him and I are still as thick as thieves. It's one of the greatest people I've ever met, and that friendship has transcended guitar companies, has transcended contracts, has transcended money, shows, travel. He's always been like the rock of a friend, and that's another blessing that out of that relationship came that friendship, which is as valuable, if not more than money, right?
Yeah. The
people around it. So, yeah. Anyways, I could tell right away that Boogie Street was running its course. I was fatiguing.
So in 2010-ish, and then you still continued on.
Yeah, I continued on and still kept the office. Well, technically, I met Natalie. I always say this whirlwind, this like hurricane blew into my life because she was that girl when we were younger just wouldn't give me the time of day, right? The parents wouldn't let me date her.
Wait, you knew her when you were kids?
Yeah. Then we started with separate ways. She had 3 kids from her prior marriage. I had prior marriages. And then we kind of just met as 2 single people again. It was really a cool story. It's a cool story. And there was, when I met her, I might have had a little bit of doubt for the first couple of months because where I'm going like 90 miles an hour usually, she's at 150. Mm. She works for the airline. She's always moving. She's like a flurry of activity. But once I got to know her kids, and it was just right. When you know, you know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when you know, you know. So I met her in 11, and she was very instrumental in giving me some courage that hey, maybe Boogie Street has seen its day. Maybe it's time for you to either retire if you think you can, which why would I do that at such a young age, but or get on with the next thing, which was horrifying to me.
Yeah.
I couldn't go work for somebody. How could I go sit in the office or manage? I can't manage myself. I can't manage people, right?
I understand. I relate completely.
Right. So what's going to pay me something commensurate with my efforts? Or just give me enough money to have a good time with? Because I was having a good time. Guitars was easy at that point, and being a realtor and real estate just made sense. My own turns, my own schedule. You know, I can wear jeans. Sorry, Howard Hanna, but I wear them anyways. I can wear jeans and a dress shirt like I was dressing anyways.
Yeah.
Right. I could be myself. By the grace of God, I ran into Michael Cowden at Howard Hanna, and I went to lunch with him. I wanted to take him to lunch, which he did go to lunch. He made sure he ate pretty well that day. But he answered every question I had. I was done talking with Mike. I literally could have ran through the wall. I was ready. So I did that like in 2013, and I was still doing Boogie Street on the side. But once I hit real estate, and once I just got my sea legs, first couple of months, I knew this was my destiny. And I still love the instrument. I still play every day. I still love what we did, but it was about time. It had been 15 years by 2014, and I figured what a legacy to go out on 15 years. We quietly shut it down, put the stock away, quietly sold pieces off here and there, the people that wanted them. We get asked a lot if we'll ever return to it. I'll never say never, but I don't think so. I think it was a good part of my life at the right time in my life. We made a lot of people happy, and in turn, they made me very happy.
Win-win.
It was a win-win. I look back on it. I look back with a lot of fondness. So, great chapter in my life. Exciting chapter in my life.
Very exciting. And then you're into real estate.
The next thing, we're on to the next thing. Real estate's been amazing. And I was at Howard Hanna, great company for a couple of years. Went to Remax, also a fantastic company for something different. Remax was Hanna to me. Again, it's just to me. Hanna was very corporate style. Remax was very entrepreneurial. I love that because I was out on my own. Yeah. And then Michael left Howard Hanna and started his own brokerage. And as soon as he did that, I knew it was a matter of time. And now I've been with Cowden Creek for a couple of years. And like I said, knock on wood, no complaints. As happy as I've ever been in real estate as I am right now.
So how did you get you're in real estate. Yep. You had Boogie Street.
Yep.
You have this amazing space. And then you started the Eric McKenna Project, telling people's story or helping them share their stories. How did that come about?
So, necessity is the mother of invention. The necessity was that I am not much on meetings, as Michael will tell you. I wanted to have my own space to work. I had leased these spaces already from the wonderful Eric Gaber, the landlord of our building. And the laws in Pennsylvania are kind of funky. You can work out of a space, but if you're not the broker, you just can't advertise. Okay. So it's a private office. But I had this extra space that I was storing real estate signs now that the guitars were pretty much done. I had this extra space. I have 2 suites here. So I'm doing real estate out of one. I'm staring at this extra space. At the same time, my 2 kids, I had the youngest out of our collective 5. My son Major had just graduated high school. He's got his own life. My daughter Gwen at the time was 16 on 17 going on 37.
I understand.
Have her own life. And Natalie's 3, Damien, Saffron, and Sierra, have just done incredibly well in their own lives. Their sail was set. And Natalie flies for the airline, so she's gone about a third of the month. It just came down to the point where I didn't want to be like my dad in this regard. I didn't want to work every day all the time because in the end it becomes about trinkets then, paying more taxes, but also trinkets like what can I buy, what can I give, what can I gift somebody. And then I'm just so over the materialism thing. I just left that behind. Yeah. So making X amount of dollars or making X amount of dollars plus another 30,000 maybe for putting all these extra hours in didn't appeal to me. And I just said, what can I do? I mean, like, do I at that time I was already kind of jogging a little bit. And when my ankles hurt, I was power walking like the mall walkers, right? But I was spending a lot of time alone, exercising, and I was starting to feel really good. But I was listening to podcasts. My brain was like, these podcasts are amazing. Like, there's no commercials or very few commercials. It's on the internet. They can swear. They can do whatever they want to do, right? And I just became this Joe Rogan addict. Like, this Rogan's guy's nuts. I don't think he's very funny. Not the funniest comic I ever heard, but boy, does he have this podcast thing down.
Yeah.
And Paul Stanley of Kiss shows up on Joe Rogan podcast years after I quit working with him. I'm like, holy shit. And then like David Lee Roth, and then there was a theoretical physicist, and there was this one, and there was that one. And I'm like, this is crazy. He's getting all these A-listers, and all they're doing is just shooting the shit.
Yeah. I'm
going, I can't get A-listers, and I'm not a comedian, and I can't have my own building for a studio, but I am in Pittsburgh. I'm not afraid to ask anybody anything.
Yeah.
And I do have a room to make a nice studio. So I tell my wife I'm going to build a studio. She goes, well, are you going to record people's records down there? I'm like, no, I'm going to talk to people. She goes, you're going to do what? You're going to... Yeah, I'm gonna buy some mics and like some video. I'm gonna put a full show, and I'm gonna make the whole room all about me. I'm gonna like put like old guitars in there and photographs from the things that I love and the photographs of the Boogie Street years. And I'm gonna call the studio the Boogie Street Studio as a little bit of a nod, a little bit of a tip of the hat to Boogie Street. So the essence of the thing lives. I already had the trademark logos, both of them. I own them. I just altered the wording from guitars to studio. I used the same marks, the same logos. I kept the same vibe. And I'm just going to make it quirky and eclectic and odd so that if my shows really suck in the beginning, at least the video of the studio will look amazing. Something will hold their interest, right? And that's how it started. I just said I'm going to find interesting and accomplished people, hopefully in the Pittsburgh area. And I know I come from a music background. I didn't want it to be a music podcast. I also didn't want Boogie Street or the studio or my background to be about the show. The accoutrements of the studio are me, my life. But the shows are about the guests and the topics are about. So we're kind of the backdrop of the show, but we're not the show. Does that make any sense?
Oh, it's a beautiful combination. I fell in love with your show.
Thank you.
I mean, the studio #1 was so impressive. I'm like, wow, this is a top-rate show. Come in there, all the equipment. Here I am with my iPhone and my tripod from
you can do
Amazon.
It nowadays. You don't need all of that. I mean,
no, but it was just fantastic. And then your creativity really comes through.
Thank you.
So everybody, go check out the Eric McKenna Project. Watch his show. Look at the studio. I mean, it's very authentic, creative, and it really does speak a lot about who you are while you're telling other people's stories.
Yeah, and I think it's where you and I connected to. So it's very important, and I want you to hear this from me. It was very important for me to know this. When I started this, my dearest friend in the world, my brother from another mother, my brother who was there for me when I was a kid, my guitar instructor, my confidant, the closest thing I have to probably a mentor that I know outside of the legendary Jim Rohn, this gentleman's name is James Stewart, Jimmy Stewart, a business executive here in Pittsburgh, a wonderful father and husband, a guy that you can look up to on a lot of fronts as someone who is doing it right. When I had this crazy idea, I sat down with Jim. And we just made a list of things we're going to do. And I wanted to make a list about how I'm going to fix the studio up. Yeah. His list says, what are you going to talk about? And who's going to be on the show? Yeah. So I made this list of 200 people, which you were certainly on.
Thank you.
And 200 people. And he goes, these 200 should turn into your first 100 shows. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And we haven't quite made it, but we're close.
Yeah.
So I made this list of people that were people of notoriety, influence, and people that accomplished cool stuff in Western PA, and a couple from outside of the area. And the idea was, if I'm not vested in the story, if I'm not finding the story fun or interesting, I'm not having them on the show. Yeah. Why not be selfish? I didn't set out to do this monetarily. an extension of my personality, and I'm doing it, at least initially now, I'm doing it for fun, so why not make it interesting? And I've turned down guests politely that wanted to take me into areas that I just wasn't interested in. One of them is politics. We've turned down, because it's been election season last 2 years, we've turned down a lot of politicians that probably wanted the free airtime.
Right.
And some of the topics probably would have been interesting to listen to, but that's not what we do. I had to
I
make
have a lot of respect for that, because some people would want to get the notoriety and recognition for aligning themselves with certain politicians and doing what
No
you're
interest.
doing.
No
I'm proud
interest.
of you for that,
Yeah, well,
for staying true.
Well,
to the
I
mission.
appreciate you saying that, but it's when you, again, it comes back to having a personal philosophy, right? So when I really kind of somewhat tried to figure out what that personal philosophy was, I realized that I'll always vote. It ain't anyone's business who I vote for, but I'm not going to align myself with any party. I'm not going to buy into the model. I'm not going to buy into this system. And I'm not an anarchist. That's not how I'm wired at all.
You're just not defined by what.
I will not let. They're all buffoons. Who runs is a buffoon. The people behind them, they just are. And buffoon might be a very critical thing. I'm sure there are some good people in politics, but they're few and far between. It's buffoonery. The fact that they're going to dictate to us one way or another how we have to feel or vote or how we have to talk or who we're going to support, that's like, I mean, I'm an Oakland A's fan, right? And we always laugh at Yankee fans because the Yankees always beat us. But, you know, politics has become like rooting for your sports team.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
And there's other political parties now that aren't a political party, but now they can be, by definition, a political party that's a movement. It's scary.
The thing is, I just didn't want to be defined by someone else's
Right.
doing to me or doing even to my mind. I didn't want to be defined by anybody else. So having that philosophy where I just don't like the arena.
Yeah.
I don't. And I was a councilman in my hometown for a couple of years I was a young Democrat. Not the Republicans are any better, but I was a young Democrat councilman in this town. I got my taste of politics in my 20s. I hated it then, and I hate it worse today. Back to the show, I just didn't want to go that route. It wasn't, and you're right, I could have gotten a lot of even maybe governor candidates at the time that all that was happening, and lieutenant governor candidates and state senators and our congressmen, but I don't want to fucking be used.
Yeah.
And I know that when my guests that I invite on this show to tell their story and to converse with me and have a conversation, maybe share a cocktail and relax, like your story, people like that are not there for an agenda. They're not there to push anything. I've never felt like any of my guests have tried to push anything on me or the watchers or the viewers or the listeners of the show. And that's great. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Someone's going to exude an agenda. I've had a couple political themed guests that went directions that were either pro-Trump or anti-Trump, seems to be the one or the other. And I don't edit my shows generally at all, but I try to steer everything away from that political bent because I really, regardless of what party you belong to, Jaime, or where you vote in November, if you vote, that doesn't define, in my eyes, who you are as a person. I want to know you, your story, and what your life is like without the nonsense of casting a political vote. That's the story to me.
I agree.
You see, now if there's a politician who was accomplished and did things for hook or crook, better or worse, or has a notoriety of a negative standpoint and has learned from it, once they leave office, if they want to come and share their story, and there's a few that are probably going to do that, we'll talk to them then.
Yeah.
But I have no interest on interviewing a current candidate, an elected official, or any of the staff of that elected official or the staff of any particular movement or political party. I'm not saying it won't happen. If the circumstance is right, I may try one or two, but it isn't in my gun sights now to go do that. It's nothing that interests me. And if I'm not interested and I'm not invested in the show, how can I be genuine to my guests? We are the anti-soundbite.
Right.
I also think we are Pittsburgh's talk show, and I stand on that moniker. And it's a heady thing to say that we're Pittsburgh's talk show, but when it's all done, my goal is to prove that the Eric McKenna Project will undoubtedly be Pittsburgh's talk show, because we're unbiased, unsponsored. There is no angle here. Mm-hmm. We are uncensored. We are unvarnished. Mm-hmm. We are the anti-soundbite. We are authentic, real, and subtly in your face.
I love it. That was mine used to be called In Your Face. Did you know that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that is a beautiful concept, and it's going really well from what I see.
Thank you.
And I think that you're going to
thank you for inviting me today. I know we've gone long, and I apologize, but
this is great. This is the meat and potatoes of
I'm never
Eric
shy of talking.
Hey, I wanted your story, and you'd given me your true story.
I have.
Like, when people ask me questions, and I've been interviewed a few times, I've kept a lot of things out.
Sure.
And you're very brave.
Thank you.
And you're going to help a lot of people, and I know that. In Pittsburgh's talk show, you're going to be more than Pittsburgh's talk show. I see you being bigger than that already.
That's very kind.
I mean, with the professionalism, the authenticity, and your genuine interest in people.
I do have that. And like my father has said many times to me, and on Father's Day, it's almost, how can I not repeat? If I said it already, I apologize. But the one thing he said to me, my dad was unvarnished. Mm. My dad was not filtered at all, but he would say to me, he said, "Son, you're a little weird." I mean, son, you're a little weird. But he said, "You are an acquired taste. You're an acquired taste." He said, and there's nothing wrong with that. He goes, it's going to be harder for you probably along the way, because you're not going to want to fit into you're going to be that round peg going in a square hole, or the square peg going in a round hole. It's going to be harder, but when you find the people that do dig you, when you find the people that you are the acquired taste, you are for them, they're going to love you, and you're going to get the opportunity to love them. And that has been the case, Jaime. Friends, show guests that become friends, clients of mine that become friends. I might not be the right realtor for you. I may not take you to the $4 million listing, in my denim and my baseball cap. I might not be that guy. I'm not for everybody. I'm an acquired taste. I'm okay with that. The message is, be comfortable. Find a way to be comfortable in your own skin. If you take nothing from this whole long story, and I apologize it's so long, take with it to find a mentor, someone like Jim Rohn. Maybe it is a living family member, a friend. Find somebody that you can vent to, someone that you can ask help. Seek out people that are wiser than you. Never pretend to be the smartest person in the room.
Right.
Seek
then you're
out
in the wrong
that
room,
help.
they say. If you're the smartest person in the room.
That's exactly right. It is. And be humble enough to ask for help. People are good. People are genuinely my experience has been that nothing good in my life has ever come without participatory events, participatory conversations, inviting wonderful people in and asking for help. Nothing good, whether it's therapy, relationships, wherever. Don't be so stubborn to think you got it all figured out, because we don't. We don't. We need each other.
That's a great message to leave our guests with.
Yeah.
So how can they find you?
Thank you. EricMcKenna.com.
Okay.
EricMcKenna. The Eric McKenna Project has its own show page. Eric McKenna Project, Eric McKenna Realtor, Eric McKenna. If you can't find me, you're not looking that hard, because I've worked hard to make sure our web presence is out there. But you can start at EricMcKenna.com. Start at Facebook. My realtor page is at CallEric.com. But Google's a wonderful thing. Yeah, if you can't find me, you're not looking.
Yeah.
So, thank you,
Well,
Jaime.
it's been an honor. Thank you for sharing your powerful story and inspiring others.
Thank you.
It's truly an honor.
And thank you for what you do. And someone that's in the same field, I love what you're doing. I love the format. I love the mobile nature of the show, whether coming, as you were kind enough to come to my office today, but also having guests at wonderful eateries in town, creating that live kind of vibe. It's going to work for you. It's going to be wonderful. And thank you for letting me be part of what I think is going to be a long road of show success for you.
Well, I'm sure that we're going to be collaborating more in the future.
I hope. So. Thanks for letting me tell my story and getting the record out there. I think selfishly for me, it's important for my family. And if nothing else, if it helps anybody, just never to give up, no matter what.
Yeah.
and the record for my children and hopefully their children, some kind of history there.
Oh, that'll be great. This will be great for them.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, friends.